All right, welcome back to the Pineapple Couch with B-Rob. We got a great segment here. We're going to be talking about the upcoming Loki series that premieres this Tuesday night at midnight on Disney Plus. Most of you normal people will probably watch it on Wednesday. As for me and the person that will be co-hosting this with me, we will watch it on Tuesday night. Very excited to talk some Loki. I'm very excited to talk about it with my good friend Peter Gonzalez. Peter, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to dive into this next Disney Plus series. I mean, Disney Plus has been on a roll, so I have
Mm-hmm.
good expectations for what's to come.
Yeah, and so off of that, here's what I will say. I have enjoyed WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I enjoy most Marvel properties though, so I'm not going to lie and say there haven't been parts of both that I wish they did a little better or it was like, I don't know, a little more impactful. Like for example, Doctor Strange not showing up in WandaVision and some other stuff that was in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I think I like them both though, but I do see some of the flaws. This Loki one, I think will deliver on every aspect of what we wanted with WandaVision and what we wanted with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and just kind of really give us that impactful Disney Plus show. I know WandaVision was impactful, but I think that we'll see maybe the effects of this in this show. I don't know. I just have very high hopes for this. Should I put them? Should I put them down a bit, Peter?
No, I think it's good to have those hopes because if you're a Marvel nerd like both of us, then you're
Mm-hmm.
aware that the writer behind this show, Loki, is also the man was tasked with doing the rewrites for Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness. So
Mm.
there's definitely conversation that Marvel has within its stable of like, you're making this movie, but this one's been done by this person. Have those conversations. Let's figure out how to have continuity. So I was reading a great article that he is very passionate about doing this show, and he's
Mm-hmm.
excited for these to be there's 6 standalone episodes, but because you have a week, it has so much to unpack within each episode that does connect to the overarching theme of the show. And I think this show is one that is similar to Falcon and the Winter Soldier in that we will get a couple of seasons, and it makes sense
Mm-hmm.
to have a few seasons where this show can play in. Interestingly enough, though, where does this show is this show take place right after Endgame, or when does this kind of take place? Similar to how Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision do connect to Endgame. I'm curious
Mm-hmm.
to see how this plays in there, seeing as this is a different Loki.
Yeah, and I mean, off of that, I would not be surprised if the first scene of this Loki show is literally maybe 3 to 5 seconds from Endgame of him disappearing with the Tesseract in that alternate branch reality. And it also, I had been reading like 6 months ago, it had not been confirmed, and they were kind of acting like Loki and Doctor Strange really won't connect that much, which made no sense to me because Multiverse of Madness is Doctor Strange, and obviously with the different timelines that Loki is on, that obviously affects the multiverse. So I'm glad that it's going to have some stuff that like correlates with one another. And I think that this gives us a high chance of perhaps seeing Loki, maybe Mobius played by Owen Wilson in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
I think I mean, because we don't have a traditional Avengers movie on deck for this phase currently, it is highly possible that these movies are going to be more characters per each one, as opposed to the traditional like you have your movie, you do your movie, and then we get together after so many movies. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an interesting way of you can, which is a complaint that we talked about before, where it's like if this is happening in say New York, why aren't there more people here to figure this problem out? Why are these heroes not coexisting outside of Avengers movies? So I think this is a great opportunity for that coexisting to happen in a very organic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm quite excited for it. So what we're gonna do on this podcast is this is gonna be our preview. We're gonna do every week. We will be breaking down Loki. I actually like this new release time because so we get it at Tuesday night rather than Thursday night. So what we're gonna do is Tuesday night, Peter and I are gonna watch it. We're gonna rewatch it on Wednesday. Give you guys time to watch it, and then we're gonna be putting out pods every Thursday of our breakdowns of Loki episodes as well. And we're going to be putting them on YouTube as well, like we did with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision. So go subscribe on there. But today for the pod, what we're going to do is a preview. So we're going to go through Loki's past appearances in the MCU and kind of like how we got here. Let's sum it up. And then we'll talk about the series, maybe some theories that we have, talk about our favorite Loki performances in the MCU. Because, I mean, he's been in some very, very good movies in the MCU. A lot of the ones, I mean, Ragnarok is maybe the best solo one, in my opinion. And he is a big part of that. So, but
And
we need to.
we have talked about Ragnarok several times throughout the podcast. If you've been joining us for several episodes, you know that
Mhm.
it comes up quite a bit when we talk about things in the MCU.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, shout out Taika Waititi because it sounds like Thor Love and Thunder just wrapped production and filming. And I have very high hopes for that movie. So, which we will see Loki in. But before we get to that, we're going to summarize what he's been doing. Peter, how about you do me the honor? And let's start with how we met Loki in Thor 1 in 2010?
2011.
2011. Wow. 10 years ago.
2011. That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite wild. So Loki first comes out. We are obviously introduced to it's in the Thor movie, Thor 1. And everything takes place being in Asgard, you know? Loki is Thor's brother, and he wants the throne as well. I think that's one of his main motivations from
Yep.
the beginning. It's like he does fight alongside his brother, but he wants to be the main MVP. He wants the glory. He wants the throne. It's just not in the cards for him to automatically get that. And I think that friction again is what I think the MCU does so well, and having someone who is super close to you, in this case, brother in quotation marks, who is you're going to become your enemy, frenemy throughout the MCU course. But we do find out in this particular movie that there's more to Loki than meets the eye, and when it comes to being Thor's brother, do you want to kind of open up why I say that?
So Loki is half frost giant. And Odin goes and takes him from Jotunheim. And so there's always, like you're talking about the rift between Thor and Loki. It starts there because he's not fully Asgardian. He is part Asgardian, but he is part frost giant, which is kind of viewed in that movie as a big negative. He's not as like, I don't want to sound like, isn't it kind of, don't you get the vibe? It's like kind of like Harry Potter. It's like he's not a pure blood. He's like a mudblood, I believe.
Full disclaimer, I've never seen a Harry Potter movie.
Never seen Harry Potter. Well, I think now when you were disappointed about me with Knives Out, I'm completely off I am so good right now. So, wow. Have you read the books?
No.
Oh, Peter.
I'm glad to give you this one. I'm glad to give you this moment.
It's good. I forgot your name was Peter after calling you Peter for an entire podcast, and I saw Knives Out late. So this is a big moment for me. I will revel in that. But with this, Peter, it's like an inferior complex or something with Loki and Thor.
Yeah.
And Thor is, though, like what in Thor 1, he's not very mature. He's wants to just go fight recklessly. And so he gets cast off to Earth. And we find out that Loki is doing some shit. And he comes and he sends what is that? Is it that the Eliminator or the Destroyer? The Destroyer, which is that like unbeatable robot. And he sends that after
Thor. Out
of
his space.
Yeah. And so you can carry on from there.
And I think another point is interesting that, yes, Odin does take Loki from the Frost Giants, correct? Frost?
Yeah.
And I think because his goal is that he wants to have a way of brokering peace in the future. It's like if I have Loki and I'm raising him side by side with Thor, theoretically, when they get older, I will say, hey, you're really a Frost Giant, so like you guys have lived in harmony. We're all going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen because, as you said, he sends the Destroyer to get him because during this time, Odin has fallen into Odin's sleep.
Yeah. He needs to recharge.
Which sounds quite restful at the time. But during this time, Loki lets in essentially LaFay, is that his name?
Yeah, the bad Frost Giant.
His real dad. Yeah, his real dad, theoretically, to come in, and he tells him, you know what? He's asleep. You can go kill him, and I get the throne, end of story. However, Loki, in traditional Loki fashion, ends up double-crossing his biological dad, killing him to now say he saved Odin's life, and be in Odin's good graces for like, look, I'm worthy of the throne.
Yeah. The god of mischief never fails to double cross people. It's his thing. He can do it 100 times in the MCU. And the great thing about the character Loki and the performance by Hiddleston is it's great every single time. It really never gets old. And yeah, and so that's our first impression of Loki, right? We get that Thor 1 experience. You really get the full Loki experience because yes, he does save Odin, but then he's kind of called out immediately for sending the destroyer. So he kind of like doesn't really win, and it's just that classic Loki. He's kind of like he's just that schemer that always gets caught in the end, no matter how good or how hard he tries. And so that brings us to Avengers.
Well, we will hold up though, because at the end of this one, there is that whole scene on the bridge where Loki essentially lets go because he says, "I didn't get the approval in the end. I'm never going to get enough. Peace out," and drops into the middle of nowhere, apparently dying for the first time in the MCU.
Which now sets us up for Avengers 1, where we see the formation of the Avengers, and we see Loki get caught. We see Thor meet Iron Man and Cap, and we also get that great scene between Loki and Black Widow, where it's very, honestly, with Black Widow coming out, it's kind of like a very great Easter egg to look back on. Like, how are you going to erase all that red? Is what Loki says to Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, and we might get the answer to that question of what is that red in the upcoming Black Widow movie. Who knows? And I mean, yeah, this is Avengers 1. Loki teams up with the Chitauri. He's got the Tesseract. He's going to take over New York. He opens a portal from space. He's got the troops from Thanos. This is the first attack really of Thanos in the MCU, and Loki's doing really well, and it's this classic Loki. Look, he looks like he's gonna win, but then we get some great teamwork with a capital T from the Avengers, and eventually Loki is thwarted. We get a great scene between Loki and Thor, a great scene between Loki and Iron Man, and obviously an all-time scene with Hulk and Loki where he just beats the living shit out of Loki. We also, though, I forgot to say, Loki does really mind control a lot in this movie. We see it done with Hawkeye, and who else? It's Dr. Eric Selvig. I think it's Selvig.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Fact checkers,
yes,
let us know. And we also, though, Loki kills Coulson. And that's what really brings the Avengers together. And so eventually Loki is thwarted. But I mean, this is an all-time villain performance. I think when we did the villains draft, we both had it at number 1, right?
We did. And I think because, again, he is very much... It's interesting, too, if you compare this to Endgame, which we'll get to. It's like right now he's working for Thanos. Thanos is like, yo, go get me Tesseract, go do this. I'm giving you this power so you can get it for me. And Loki's really leaning into the villain side of himself.
Yeah.
He's
it's like Ronin.
Oh,
It's an earlier version of this Ronin thing.
It's a very good point. And yeah, I think it's just there is so many great, as you talk about scenes, including like that one after the whole Hulk beat down where he looks up and it's all the Avengers looking at him. That's one of the greatest scenes, to see. And again, he just causes all these problems, and he has his staff, which obviously plays a role in future movies, which is we'll touch upon that. But I think it is a very solid, you have a villain, theoretically, moment.
Yeah, and it's cool that they did him in Avengers 1, because in the comic books, he is the OG villain of the Avengers. I have that old one, and it's really cool to read. And the Loki comic book costume is just so fire. I don't care if people think it's cheesy with the horns and all that stuff. The Loki costume is so sick. Let's now jump into Dark World. And Dark
World, is one of the toughest Marvel movies.
It's tough. So let's try and get ourselves through it. We got the Dark Elves attacking. We got Loki pulling another one on us, but he's kind of in prison right now. Can you catch us up on Dark World, Peter?
So Loki has been imprisoned for basically wreaking havoc on Earth. They're just like, this isn't cool.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment, there is this eventual thing coming, which is called the Convergence, which is the rare alignment of the 9 realms. 9, right?
Yep.
And it's during this time that, the Dark Elves are plotting. And I believe his name is Malekith? Malekith?
Malekith or Malachi. One of those two. We'll go with it. Fact checkers again. Let us know.
Let us know. But basically, this whole thing starts off because Jane Foster discovers the ether, if I'm not mistaken, which is one of the
Infinity Stones, yeah, and it's all like
Yes.
red though. It's weird. They like retconned it essentially to be an Infinity Stone when they realized that what they were doing. But that's it's a topic for another podcast.
So, so during all this stuff, Loki's basically in prison. But long story short, Thor's mom gets killed by Chief Dark Elf dude whose name is with an M.
Yeah,
and this is this
really quickly. Just like Loki's mom is a witch. So there is that bond of magic between the two of them, and she's a lot more like not forgiving of Loki, but maybe a little understanding, and she's still like disappointed in him, but there's a lot more love there than there is with Odin.
Yeah, and I think because she sees that he's redeemable.
Yeah.
Which is what the audience sees also. We're like, we want to root for Loki.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it goes credit to Tom Hiddleston's performance, that you make this character more three-dimensional than just like he's a villain. But essentially, and then that's interesting. That's the motivation that that Thor gives Loki to be like, help me stop this, help me stop the ether, help me stop the Dark Elves, because this dude killed our mom.
Yep.
And essentially, Loki agrees, and he gets to get out of prison. And this is the one with the great scene, if I'm not mistaken, where Loki pretends to be Captain America.
Yeah, that is all time.
And it's the only time I think where we hear him say, "I'm Captain America." Yep. If I'm not mistaken.
Yep. I think that's what I think we like deep dove that like a month or two ago, and we confirmed that. So I think we're right.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's because Loki's leaning into the ego, the I'm Captain America. So it's very on brand for the character. It's something that is, believable.
Yeah.
But essentially, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's funny how Loki, like the way he jokes about the Avengers with Thor and makes fun of him. And the cool thing about it, of Loki the character and the performance, is you can tell that he's actually very jealous. Like seeing his brother fight with these people, he's like, part of him I think wishes he could fight alongside his brother. A little part of him, if that makes sense. So the reason he makes fun of him so much is because he's jealous. That's what I think, at least.
I think so. I think that's the nuance again that Tom Hiddleston brings to that role, where it's like he has those kind of moments where you're just like, there's more to this than just like traditional jealousy. But we do go forward. There's Dark Elves. They fight them on this weird planet, which is like a crater. And essentially, Loki, through his mischief, convinces,
that planet kind of reminds me of the planet they go on to in the worst superhero movie of all time, the Fantastic Four remake.
Yeah. I didn't want to think about that movie, but now I'm thinking about it again. So
tough.
Yeah, it's an ugly looking planet, and basically the Dark Elves want the ether, and they convince him that they're gonna basically take the ether out of Jane. And during that moment, another fight ensues, and Loki ultimately sacrifices himself in a surprising move to everybody. Like, what, as an audience member, you're just like, I think that's when it really clicked for the audience, at least for me. Like, oh, I'm actually a really big fan of Loki. Like, it made more sense that, like, when you see the character die, I think it's always harder.
And the reaction from Thor, Chris Hemsworth, is he's heartbroken. And that's the great thing about the Loki-Thor relationship, is it's as simple as this. Thor is a dog, Loki is a cat. No matter how many times the cat is mean to the dog still just wants to be friends. And it's Thor loves Loki for better or worse, and he loves him too much to really, because the dog could always win, but he just wants to play with the cat, even though the cat's going to hurt him and steal his food. That's my analogy.
Wow. That's quite the analogy. That's a good one. Deep conversations on the pineapple couch right here. But essentially, he ends up dying, and Thor's basically holding his dead brother, which is it's a great scene. And again, credit to the actor's performance. And spoiler alert, they end up beating
The Dark Elves.
Dark Elves, and we never see them again. We wish. But ultimately, Thor returns home, and he tells his dad, this is Loki's sacrifice. He rejects the throne, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And he leaves. And then we have a great moment especially if these are movies you have to see in the theater, like for the first time if you saw them. It's so great because Odin's watching him walk away, and then great plot twist, Odin isn't Odin, it's Loki.
And that is expertly done, which leads us right into Ragnarok, which is, as we've mentioned on this pod maybe hundreds of times by now, just a perfect movie. It is, in my opinion, the best solo movie in the MCU. You can make an argument it's the best whole movie in the MCU. It's just so electric. And we pick up right off from Dark World, where...
Real quick, I just want to say, what's wild to think about this movie? Thor Dark World comes out 4 years after. I mean, Dark World happens, and then 4 years later, we get Ragnarok. Like, that's quite a long time to wait. Like, we have a problem waiting here, like, 6 weeks, whatever, between shows. Imagine having to wait that long. I don't remember having frustration of waiting that long.
Maybe that's because Thor Dark World didn't leave that great of a taste in our mouths. And it's kind of like... I mean, because Ragnarok is a total rebrand. And it really works. And so we'll go there. And it picks up right off from Dark World, though. Thor comes back, and we see this giant statue to Loki honoring him. We see famous actors. What is it? Who's in it? Is it?
It's Matt Damon
and Thor's brother, Chris. One of the Hemsworth, right?
Luke Hemsworth.
Sure. I have no idea. And we see them reenacting the events of the end of Dark World, where Loki makes his sacrifice, and we see Loki as Odin, really just lounging, eating some grapes, living the good life with the big statue of Loki. This is all fuel to the fire of Loki's ego. He is eating this shit up. He loves it. And then Thor comes back, and he can quickly tell that this is not Odin. And we get a great scene where he throws the hammer, and it's like it's going to come back and hit Odin or Loki in the head unless he admits that he's Loki. And we get Loki kind of being revealed by Thor, and obviously that sets us up for the rest of this movie, where the two of them then go to say goodbye to Odin. And on Earth, we get a great scene of Loki and Doctor Strange where he falls. Doctor Strange puts some sort of like spell on him. Basically, Loki free falls for like 30 minutes or whatever. So there's a great line there. And then we meet Hela for the first time, where Loki and Thor, after Odin goes away, obviously the spell or whatever that was keeping Hela away is lifted. And so she comes and she really fucks up Loki and Thor, breaks Thor's hammer, and they're sent basically, they're trying to use the Bifrost, and they get sent off of it by Hela, which ends up landing them in Sakaar, which is where Hulk is. And so we get a great scene of the play. Is it the play dead scene? Is that how they do it? You know what I mean? Where like he throws Loki at people.
Yeah. Later in the movie,
And so the Ragnarok is great, but for the purposes of Loki, this movie, it's exactly Loki. It's the same. He's looking out for himself in every way. He's trying to get to the higher part of Sakaar and be like some sort of like noble or some shit we see. And he's kind of brought back down because of his relationship with Thor. He's not looked on as highly, which leads to them eventually escaping. And Loki, though, however, doesn't join them when they escape, correct?
Correct.
Just Tessa, just Valkyrie, Thor, and Hulk go away, while Loki, we think, is he staying there to take it over, or is he just going on his merry way? Do you remember?
He was left with the thing, wasn't he?
The chip?
The chip left him like vibrating, like shaking on the ground, and not until Krog shows up, it turns it off. And the Korg, thank you. I knew it was close. And like lets him free, basically.
And so, for the purposes of this movie, we get the fight in Asgard between Thor and Hela, and it's not going that well. But then Loki comes to save the day with the big ship and Korg and Meek and all those fighters, which helps turn the tides of the battle against Hela. And that's basically. Oh, but we also get Loki going and taking the Infinity Stone when he is getting Surtur's sword or whatever, the everlasting flame that will beat Surtur and Hela. He nabs the Tesseract from there, which actually leads to our next thing in Avengers Infinity War, Peter, where Thanos is coming for the Infinity Stones. Thus, he is coming for Loki because Loki has the Infinity Stones and him and the Asgardians are on those ships because Asgard's gone. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was, and I was actually, as you were saying these things, it made me think about how if you think back, like in school, there were so many terms of like, I don't even remember like algebra and like geometry shit and stuff. And it's like, I remember everything that you're saying now, you know, the eternal flame, the sword, all these things. I'm like, I remember all these things with you.
Yeah, I wish school tested us on this rather than having to take chemistry twice. So Infinity War, how about you take it from here?
Infinity War. So we essentially have the Asgardians. They're there in space, basically, and I think that's how Infinity War starts, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, they come and we see all the Asgardians are all fucked up, and it's basically just Hulk, Thor, and Loki and Heimdall, right?
Yes. Yeah. Talking to the Maw. Was that his name?
Ebony Maw.
Thank you. See, you know these terms that I'm missing, and he's basically, they're like, you know, you're saved. We're here to save you, and it's like we're gonna like be the good people, and it's like you're not. You're literally killing people. And essentially, Thanos shows up and he wants the stone. And Thor's like, we don't have it. Like, it's not here. And Loki ultimately is like, oops, I technically have it. And essentially, Thor is basically about to die because Thanos is like, I want it, or like your brother's head, if I'm not mistaken. And ultimately, Loki's like, fine, here you go. He saves his brother again because Loki has had so much character growth. Maybe the most of anybody to the MCU. I'm not mistaken, I feel like.
I mean, I think you could. I mean, Iron Man certainly went on quite an arc.
That's true. I mean, but Iron Man was never a villain that turned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Nebula would be the only like other option, maybe. Mm-hmm.
And essentially, he gives it to him, and then Thanos is like, "We're gonna go to Earth to get the rest of them." Yep. And Loki's like, "You know what? I can be your guide. I can help you." And Thanos is like, "You've already failed once. Why am I gonna trust you to do this right?" And he's like, "No, let me. I can do this." And then he's like, "I pledge my." It's a great line.
Yeah.
And I don't want to butcher it, so just watch the movie. So he does this great line, and
it's undying loyalty, right? Isn't that what he says?
I thought it was like fidelity or something. I thought it was like some fancy
you might
English
be right.
word.
You might be right. Yeah.
It's well done. Watch the movie. If you haven't watched it, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
But essentially, through this moment, he's gonna go in with his dagger that he's had on all the movies, and to attempt to just kill Thanos, which is admirable again because he's trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Thanos just stops him because Thanos does have with the
Power Stone, Space Stone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's the purple one, right?
Power
and
Stone.
He stops them and ultimately kills Loki in the process in front of Thor, who's basically has to watch his brother die again. This is the third time he's died.
Mm-hmm.
And as an audience member, you're in the movie, and this is happening in the first 30 minutes. This is happening. So it's Ryan's just like, what is happening? And essentially, Thanos leaves the dead Loki there in front of Thor, who is heartbroken beyond now because he's literally seen his brother die for the permanent death, essentially.
Yeah, and it feels a lot more real than any of the others this one. And I mean, Thanos even makes a line about no coming back to life this time or something like that. And so, yeah, that's Loki in Infinity War. That is the arc in the journey of the Loki we met in Thor 1. That is his MCU experience. But what happens is in Endgame, when they go back in time to get the stones, you guys remember that whole Hulk incident where Tony Stark, Ant-Man, they're all there. And Loki actually, when he's getting arrested at the end of Avengers, so this is an alternate timeline, people, at the end of Avengers, he gets away with the stone. And that's where this Loki series picks up. So that's where we are now. We're here. We are to the Loki series that will be starring Tom Hiddleston as Loki. We got Owen Wilson that is going to play Mobius. We're going to be dealing with the Time Variance Authority, which they are like the police officers of the time, like of all
The
time,
sacred timeline.
of the sacred timeline. So they like make sure everything goes as planned. And I mean, I'm guessing the events of Endgame probably caused some problems. So that's why they're bringing Loki in to kind of help fix some stuff. So what we're going to see is we're going to see kind of like Loki as a hired gun. He's kind of like a prisoner in a way, but they're like, they're going to give him tasks, I think, to fix stuff in the timeline in this show that they need him to do because he is so powerful. Would you agree?
No, totally. And again, this is the god of mischief that they're bringing in. And this is Loki only taking into account Thor 1 and Avengers. Unless they do, as Brandon and I talked about before off podcast, show him essentially what his life has been, what he's been through. Like, this is where your journey was, like who you were becoming. You ultimately sacrificed yourself. And so at this point, though, he hasn't done any of that. He's basically been in Thor and he's tried to take over Earth working for Thanos. So this is all of the goodwill and the character development that we talked about is like out the window.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. So again, he's not playing up to this point. He doesn't know that his mom's dead or his dad's dead too. Also, so it's like he's not know any of these things essentially because of this. And I think it'll be interesting to see, how this sort of works to sort of address maybe things throughout as the trailer has shown us, there's going to be different time periods that he kind of travels to that were affected essentially by the time heist.
Well, he's at Pompeii, I believe.
Yeah,
in one of the trailers.
And what looked like Vormir as well, which was quite interesting to see if that actually is Vormir.
Yeah. We might see a Lady Loki in this series. I think
Kid Loki.
We're going to see, there's obviously that tease of Loki running for mayor or something like that. I think what we'll see of this is we'll see basically a summed up version of Loki's character development condensed into about 6 or so episodes of what we saw the journey he went on the MCU. We're probably going to see that again as he goes through these things and as his life is shown to him what happens. I do think that there is a chance that he does learn some of these lessons and kind of does that character arc. But the thing to remember with that is when he fulfills his character arc, he does that at the end, finally, because of Thor, his brother who he loves, even though all this shit has happened. Loki may go on a nice character arc and end up being like basically what he was in Infinity War, but he's working with the Time Variance Association, so he doesn't give a shit about them. He's still, I guarantee you, going to want to screw them over. So this character arc development, we might only see it fully realized in Thor: Love and Thunder. You see what I'm saying?
No, totally. And I do think this show has the opportunity, though it's hard to kind of have hopes for this, to have cameos from characters from the MCU. I mean, there is a scene in the trailer where he calls out to Heimdall and his brother, but it's like, are we going to see them in Loki? Are we going to... That'd
be the biggest cameo in any of the Disney Plus series, is if Thor showed up in Loki. Wouldn't it be close, right?
Yeah, because I mean, the other ones are already characters from the cinematic universe. It would have been like if Cap had shown up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier,
or Doctor Strange,
but that would have taken away from it. Like, yeah, it's hard because that can take away from what you're trying to build with these shows.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is so unique because you are visiting certain places that need to be cleaned up because of this. So this was the only moment that wasn't able to be fixed in the timeline, because Cap, when he went back in time to return the stones, this isn't something they're aware of, it's something they need to fix.
There's no chance we see Cap in this, right? Maybe dealing with alternate timeline Loki. You know what? I'm gonna apologize. I'm sorry for putting that out there because that would be fucking sweet. And that was my bad. I'm not getting anyone's hopes up, but Chris Evans showing up. Woo.
But see, I think there's a way. I think if they revisit like a scene from one of the movies, theoretically, there is a way to see the character. It's granted it wouldn't be a new performance or portrayal of the character. It'd be a scene from a existing one.
The internet would go on fucking fire if Cap showed up in this and not Falcon and the Winter Soldier. After all that, after the whole everyone wanting him to show up, it's like, oh, here's Loki turned into him for 5 seconds. We got Chris Evans to do that. Everyone would just like, ah.
That's true. That's true. What is he gonna turn into? One of them? Is he gonna? Is he? I mean, which is?
I think that's completely. There's a chance at that. I guess. I don't know. It's tough.
It's hard when you have the Quicksilver of it all. It's hard. It's hard when that exists.
So what have I complained about, or not complained about? Like, what was the character I really wanted to see in WandaVision? Doctor Strange. What was the character I would really like to see in Falcon Winter Soldier? Captain America. Yeah. If Doctor Strange and Captain America both show up in Loki, oh my God. And there is a chance of that, because Cap could be going to return looking for that stone, and Doctor Strange and Loki are intertwined, I think. So that would be hilarious. After all this, they both show up in the Loki one after we were begging. So that's just a random thought.
It's a hard because, you know, as a fan you want to see that, but then you're just sort of like, why now? But again, this movie has to connect. I mean, this show theoretically, more so than Falcon and the Winter Soldier, has to directly connect to something, essentially, because you have the upcoming Spider-Man No Way Home, and you have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse. So how does this not connect in a way to them? And I mean, what if it connects to Black Widow? I mean, that possibility, the fact that this is coming out and Black Widow lands in the middle of this is interesting to me, because it's like,
you think about that line from Avengers 1. We could see some sort of resolution to that potentially. I'm not going to get my hopes up too high for that, but I got a couple more questions before we wrap this up.
By all means,
who do we think is the big bad? Let me throw some ideas at you. First idea: is it the TVA? Are they the annoying ones? Is Loki actually cleaning up their mess? Are they like the Hayward, the bad people who are like controlling everything? I think that's an option.
So I think that's a very solid proposition. My only thing is, though, are we again doing that the authority figure is the villain again?
I mean, I'm not saying I want that, but they go back to that
but
well.
I'm saying if we go that route, I think it's again similar to WandaVision, where it was the dude
Hayward.
Sword. It was the dude in Sword with the good intentions that got twisted, similar to the
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Yeah, so it's
I don't want that then. That's a good point.
So that's my thoughts on that one.
Good point. Second option: alternate version of Loki, whether it be female Loki, just a kid Loki, or just an alternate version of this age of Loki. You know what I mean? That, I think, is an option.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. I think that would be interesting to see. Okay.
And I have the best one saved for last.
Okay.
Kang the Conqueror. Kang the motherfucking Conqueror, who is going to appear in Ant-Man 3 and is rumored to appear in Loki. Kang is a time-traveling, mean motherfucker. He will just cause a lot of bad, and definitely would be a name worthy enough to be a big bad in the MCU. I mean, hell, even a big bad of like, Kang is so big, he could be the big bad of like a phase and a movie. Like, so I think maybe building up Kang and Loki, and we get to see him again in either maybe a little glimpse in Doctor Strange, and then we get him in Ant-Man 3 Quantumania. What do you think of that?
So to go off of this, because I'm invested in this theory also. We're gonna double with on this one with you as well. Is there's a character, one of the time variance characters is I had to look it up to remember the name correctly. Judge Renslayer, directly related. In comic books to that last name correlates to a character that is involved with Kang the Conqueror. I think this show would be a great way to do it. I know we wanted Mephisto in WandaVision to sort of set up Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, but I think here you have the ability to have a villain who is directly tied to the TVA, as we said. So I think it's the possibilities are there, unless you're turning this, and Loki's ultimately the big bad at the end of this, which is the twist. But I think that you can introduce someone big and new in this sort of fashion.
I agree. So last question, and this is tough, but to wrap up our Loki preview again, we're gonna have pods out every Thursday. You can catch them on YouTube too, for every episode. What is your favorite version of Loki in the MCU? Performance, because I guess they're all like similar versions. It's like and this is tough because, like we kind of mentioned, similar shit happens every time he's in it, but it's Loki, so it's always captivating.
It shouldn't be surprising, but my favorite portrayal of appearance of Loki is in Ragnarok. I mean, from when he's watching Thor fight Hulk in the arena to when he's tied up and they're throwing the bottles at him, to when he shows up and he's like, your savior is here. Like, I think that's such a great portrayal. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what yours is.
Yeah. Obviously Ragnarok is right up there. I kind of associate the Ragnarok and Infinity War are basically like the same one, in my opinion. I will say though, my favorite performance would actually be Thor 1. How they set him up, because I do think in Thor 1 they do an incredible job of showing the pain he is in and how bummed this whole situation, how he wants that approval, which really goes a long way for setting up how Loki, why he is the way that he is. And I mean, I just think from him falling off what's the Rainbow Bridge called? I can't believe I'm not remembering that. Whatever the Rainbow Bridge is called. And I mean, even just the back and forth between him and Thor, him turning on Thor realizing it. I thought that Thor 1 Loki was very, very special. Similar to Avengers Loki, but a little more insecure.
The Bifrost.
That was so obvious. I'm disappointed in myself.
No, but what do you think of that? Great thing. It's the introduction, so it has to be good. It has to have a solid beginning. You're not going to root for this character. You're not going to be bummed. You're not going to be like, oh, he's dying again. You're going to legitimately be bummed about the fact that all 3 deaths were essentially like because the character is done so well. And I think it's credit to Marvel, who did take a gamble on casting Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth in that first Thor. They could have gone a completely different route, which I think is interesting for Thor Love and Thunder, which is there's supposed to be rumored versions of them in that as well.
Ooh, that would be very good.
We'll see the people that were going to originally be them or something.
That would be very cool. I'd like that. Any final thoughts before we get to this upcoming, finish this segment and get to the Loki episode this week?
As we were talking about, our favorite portrayals, I thought back to Avengers, where we see him, and I mean, there's that great scene where he at that kind of gala thing where they first fight him, and it's such a great scene, and his dynamic with the Avengers, and that unwilling to yield energy, and how he's always one step ahead of everybody. I'm excited to see that portrayal of him in Loki.
Yeah, and it's like we're talking about all this, and Loki's never been a main character in anything of this. Like, yeah, he's been a big character, but now we're getting a show solely focused on Loki, which I just think will be electric, because most of the stuff we see from Loki is from a Avengers or Thor perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're looking at as a side character to somebody else, which I think this Disney Plus experiment has done, when it was first proposed, people were like, is this going to work to have these standalone heroes that aren't in the movies? But granted, maybe the pandemic has helped the fact that you've been home watching these, but you're really able to see these characters exist in these tight stories that show you there is, and again, it speaks to comics. You're looking at these stories that are so deep you don't have time to fully address in 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think this is such a well done. Because, I mean, yeah, it would be cool to see a series about Iron Man or see one about Captain America, but we've been there. So why not lean into these characters that we haven't yet?
I agree completely. And I think it's going to be very exciting. I think it's going to be the highest rated or most watched MCU Disney Plus show for sure. And I think it could contend with Mando season 2 because I think that's the number one. But I'm excited. I'm excited. It should be a nice 6-episode run. I'm excited to cover it with you weekly. Again, every Thursday we'll be getting those pods out for you as well on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. We got some merch on the way. I'll hold it up for the YouTube listeners now. We're going to do a bunch of different colors. Got that nice pineapple couch logo. Got to rep the couch. You know what I mean. Peter, always a pleasure talking to you. Have a great rest of your weekend. And I'll probably be texting you at Tuesday at midnight.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. See you guys.